those that don't know the face, so a software developer, just like Judith said, I've gone through Dot Campus under the tutelage and leadership of Theodore Carfor, and then Judith is our program manager. So it's my honor to speak to us today on web development best practices. So first of all, we'll be answering what is web development. And it's all about the building and maintaining of websites that happen behind the scene. Web development is the building and maintaining of websites. It's the work that happens behind the scene to make websites look good, work fast, perform well, with a seamless user experience. Web developers do this using variety of coding languages, and the languages they use depend on the tasks they are performing and the platform on which they are working. A website usually functions on two ways. We have those we have the front end side of it, and also we have the back end side of it. So the front end part of it refers to the surface level elements, the things you can see, the page formats, the color schemes, and so on. And we can do this using HTML, CSS, and then giving it functionalities in JavaScript. While the backend part of it is where we build the logic behind what we see in the front end. We use languages like Node.js, we have C#, we have Java for writing the backend. Then for web development web practices, we'll start with the planning and strategy. First of all, planning and strategy. Before we build a website or an application, what do we do? First of all, we sit down to plan it and then strategize on what we want. Here we also clearly outline what the website application aims to achieve, the target audience, people we are trying to reach out to. This will guide our development process and ensure that the final product we have aligns with the intended purpose. We also outline our goals, how many persons we want to meet, the number of users that may be using the website afterwards. If it's a financial application, what level of security do we need? And if we are using we'll be calling a third-party API there. What third-party libraries would we be using to making the calls? Okay. Then second one is development practices. After we have planned and strategized, secondly, we'll have the development practices. First of all, for those developing, first of all, we'll make our codes clean and maintainable. And how do we make our codes clean and maintainable? We are there to coding style and naming conventions. We know of the camera case. We also minimize the use of global variables, as they can lead to side effects and make the code harder to reason about. We make sure we use local variables and pass them into the functions when needed. Also, we carry out error handling, which will make our code robust and prevent unexpected crashes. How do we handle errors? For example, when we're getting inputs from users, we validate the inputs and make sure that these are the inputs we need. We also follow the single responsibility principles by keeping our functions and methods short. I think I will show an example with a code to demonstrate these points, keeping our code clean and then maintainable. Then before I go there, final one for that, we'll have separation of concerns. Okay. What separation of concerns for those working on front end? we'll have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So instead of using inline styling, putting every file inside the HTML, we can have a separate file for CSS, have a separate file for HTML, and have a separate file for JavaScript. So I will share my screen for the code now. So this is a simple CRUD operation written with Java. Written with Java, yeah. So it's called, I think I did this for Trust Bank. So for creation of user, so we can see the incoming request from the user named create user requests. So this is what will be coming from the front end. The values from the user. So you can see here, I'm checking for error handling, I'm checking if I find the user through the email here. So here I'm verifying that the email actually exists. And if it doesn't exist, or if it's incorrect, then throw this exception. So in case you run this application and then call the create user API, if the email is wrong, if it does not carry at, or the person didn't put email at all, this exception will be thrown and you know where the error is coming from. So that is that. Then another one is keeping the methods short and simple. This enhances testing. It helps us in testing, carrying out testing, unit testing, integration test. So you can see inside here, I have a method called create user form requests. So let me go to that method. So we'll see what it's doing. So this is where I set the incoming requests. This is where I persist the incoming request of the user to my database. So instead of writing this bulk of code from here to here, inside this method where I'm calling it, I had to create a separate method or function for it, and then had to call it inside this method. So by this, you can see that I've separated consign and I've made my code shorter. This create user, I've made it shorter. If I had not created this method on its own, the code here would have been reaching like 70. The line of code here would have been reaching like 70. So another one is exception handling. Okay, before I go that, this kind of thing should not be seen in our code. We should always keep it clean. Commenting of code inside our, having comments inside our code, it makes the code look rough. It's not good at all. So we should always remove it, make our code clean and very simple. So here I'm calling an API for this method, create accounts. And the method for the API call is this send post create account method, accounts. I guess you can see that. So inside it, I'm wrapping it inside the try and catch. So this try and catch, the function is for exception handling. When I'm making this API call, and then for some reasons, it didn't go through, it will be catched inside this try and catch. And then I'll see the reason why that API call is not going through. So it's part of exception handling. All right, so I think I would stop here for now for the keeping our code clean, and then so another one is security. Security. When building an application, of course, the endpoints and the APIs are not meant for everybody. All users are not allowed to just come into our website and then start creating user, start logging in, start viewing our data or fetching data. We need to have some level of security to secure the endpoints, such that unless you are authenticated, unless you have the permission, that is when you can make use of, you can call the endpoints. So this is where security comes in. So in Java, we use what we call, we have JWT, have screen security, which you implement. When you configure it into your application, and then you start calling your endpoint, there's no way that endpoint can go unless you obtain a token that you would use in signing in to give you access to the endpoints. So this is for security. It helps us to build robust applications well secure to avoid third party coming into the application and then messing it up or getting unauthorized access to our data. I would have loved to show us an implementation of that, but then the IDE I'm using is actually expired, so I can't actually run that application. So another one is testing and quality assurance. So for each function we build during the development stage of an application, we need to test it. We need to make sure that the all inputs are validated, it's working as desired, all user experiences are okay. If a user puts a wrong email address that does not come with what it's supposed to come like at, the user should be notified. So these are all things we carry out in testing. And we have types of testing. We'll have the unit testing. Unit testing is where we test individual components, individual methods to ascertain that they are all working very fine. Then we'll have integration testing. Integration testing is where we carry out a test for the whole component, starting with from the controller, then connecting the database through the services, in fact, running the whole endpoint. Unit testing is just for individual method or functions. Integration testing is for the whole endpoint from the controller down to the services to make sure that it's working perfectly. There are also other types of testing, but I'll just leave it at these two basic ones. Then we'll have another one, the version control. Version control, of course, we know we've been using Git. We know the importance of Git and what it does. It helps us to store our application for future references. So it's one of the software development best practices. Whenever you start building an application, always try to commit and push to a repo. Then we'll have documentation. For an application that must have gone live, built by a team, let's say a team of 5 persons. Of course, each of them must have worked on just maybe 3 or 4 endpoints for that application. You might not really know what the other person worked on because you work, then you push, and then the code gets merged, and then you pull again, you implement your own endpoints, and then commit again and push. The other person code gets merged, the other person pulls, and then does his own. So in case you have, let's assume you have a new member in the team, and then the application has gone live. The person is told to clone the application and then start studying the code base. Of course, he needs a document that guides him through of what the applications are doing, what he used in doing the applications, the technology, the endpoints, how he went about it. It gives the person free right to understand the code base well. So there are several ways of carrying out documentation. The simplest one, we can carry out documentation using Postman. I think is the simplest for all the endpoints we'll have. That's the simplest, but for beginners. But then there are high level ones we can do carry out documentations for the APIs and methods we could. So why the next one, I think that should be the final one, is collaboration and communication. if we're working in a team, we need effective communication. Even if we're working alone, just like in Dot Campus, we are given a task to do it under 1 week and then submit. You need to communicate. Maybe you're not getting something right, it's difficult. Communicate with your team, communicate with your mentor that you are not getting this right. Something that will take you like 2 hours can end up taking you like 5 minutes to get done. And then it saves you time, saves you energy. So communication and collaboration is key to software development. One of the best practices to keep always communicating. So I think this is the end of the slide. So I'll be stopping here to take questions if we have any.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much, Uchenna, for the very short walkthrough. I'm saying thank you because, yeah, we're right on time. And then we covered basically everything that we need to know about web development best practices. So if there's any question now, we'll take it. You can drop your questions in the comments or you raise a hand so we can take it. Should you have a question?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
It is. So, Eric, when you were explaining your clean code and maintainable code, you showed us some code examples, and then you said that if you had not broken the codes into different parts, that it could have been up to 70 lines or more. So my question is, yeah, so what if it's up to 70 lines? What's wrong with that? I mean, it's my code. I can write it however I want. So it was really wrong in having a long code that's not broken apart like you did in yours.
Okay. First of all, the code will not be optimized. One of the best practices as well is performance optimization of your code so that it runs faster. Okay. So if you have bulky line, lengthy line of code in one method, it slows down the speed of operation. Assuming you are using, let's say, 1,000 or 10,000 persons are accessing your endpoints in every 1 minute, it will slow down the code. That is one. The optimization will be slow. Then the second one is for testing. It's very difficult for you to carry out appropriate testing for that method, both integration test and unit testing. But it will make it easier for you to carry out testing, assuming you have separate methods. You know that you are just testing for this method, and then if there is issues or errors, you can always know where to go and figure it out. But when you have lengthy lines of code, it becomes difficult. But majorly is code optimization.
Okay, that makes sense. Does it impact how? So I'm thinking, since my code is separated and broken apart in different places, will it not affect how people read the code? So if I'm working with people, are they still going to understand my code? Like, are they going to get the code? Because I'm feeling like if I had written everything in one place, they just need to go to one place and see all the things that they need to see and understand the code. But now that it's in different places, do not have impact on how they read the code?
No, I think it has impact, and impact is a positive one because it will make them to understand it more. Because each method or each function has what it returns, right? Each method or function has what it returns. So when you read a method, you know that this is what it's doing. Okay?
Right.
Yeah. So it makes it easy for someone reading the code to understand. For example, when you go to create user, And then what you first saw was validation of user inputs that the email is correct, right? Then secondly, you also a method that says create user form request. So what you have to do is put inside that method. Now check what that method is doing and see that what that method is actually doing is that it's collecting the request from the user and then setting it and then populating it on the database. Simple. So you've understood that method, what it does. Now you now go back to the main one, which is create user. So when it's populated to the database, it returns the user, right? So you turn the user to the create user method. Now the person will continue. Okay, this is the method that returns the user created.
Right.
Yeah. So it makes it easy for someone to understand the code.
That makes sense. So the other question I have, sorry for anybody that has a question. The other question I have, I'm almost done. Is there a point where, you know, breaking the codes apart like that becomes too much? Like, is there a point where you can say that, okay, this is excessive, what's it called? Excessive optimization. Let me use that word. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think they might be. It depends. It depends. Because when you are breaking codes into different functions or methods, first of all, that method must have what it does. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, and if it's something that would take let's say a longer line of code, separate it. But if it's something that will take 3 or 4 lines, you can leave it inside that main method. You might not need to break it.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot for that. G, does anybody have any question, or should I keep asking? Because I have more.
I'm not seeing anyone asking any question. I want to believe that maybe everybody already understands all best practices in web development.
Apart from me, I still have more.
Okay, apart from you still have questions. Yeah, I think you can still go ahead with your questions. For every person that has a question, you can drop it in the comments.
Go ahead. Let me also talk about 2 other things.
Okay.
So for software development practices, we also have responsive design. So we should always create website that works well on all devices and screen sizes. I believe we can achieve this in CSS using media queries and flexible layouts like CSS Grid. So it's something we also have to put into check that our applications are responsive in all devices. Then second one, for code optimization, to ensure that our codes run faster, especially when we have so many users accessing the code. We should always optimize our algorithms for better time complexity. Then we should also choose the best data structure based on the specific operations we want to perform. We know that for data structures, we have array list, we have linked list. For array list, we know that we usually use it it's good for accessing of data at a particular index because it's index based, right? So array list is good for accessing of data at a particular index. So whenever we want to access data, we should always use array list rather than using linked list. But when we want to perform deletion and insertion operations, we should always go for linked list because it's good for deletion and insertion operations. So we should also take note of concurrency. Concurrency is when 2 programs are running in parallel. So we should always know how to take care of that to optimize our code. So you can continue.
Okay, just to add to that part about concurrency, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think concurrency is more of if you're working with programming languages like Java and C#, you have to worry so much about that. But Node.js, Node.js single threaded, so we don't worry so much about. We don't deal with concurrency because it's already handled.
And Golang, right?
Yeah, Golang too. Yeah, you have to deal with that in Golang as well.
Yeah, I also heard I also know that is why all these digital banking OP they use Golang. That's what makes the operation faster because there is no concurrency. That's why
Interesting.
yes, OP money points Flutterwave. It makes their applications faster because of zero concurrency. I think use of Golang.
That's cool. So my other question is, when you talked about version control, you mentioned Git, and you said that we all know Git. This for the benefit of some of us who don't know. So I would like you to like throw more light on what Git is, what it's used for in coding, and how we can use it to make like how we can implement it as a best practice in software development and web development.
Okay, okay. Git is a distributed version control system, which we is widely used in software development to track changes in source code during the development process. Can also say it's a repository for collection of files and folders, just a collection of our code. For those that have not used Git before, you have to install it. We use it mainly for tracking of our application, the changes, committing, pushing, and then also assessing of it. So after building your application, you have to you must have installed Git. You have to use Git add to add all your files. Then you have to commit. After committing, you then have to push. So what's your next question? Sorry.
So just to throw more light on what Git is about. Yes. So previously, like some background is previously before people started using Git.
Yes.
Most people, what you do, so when you're building software and especially when you're working with a team, what most people do, like I have people who still do that, is after coding, you just zip your code, like you zip it and then you email it to the next developer. And then that developer downloads it from their email and then works on the code and then zip it again and send it back to you, and then you look at it and you make changes. Or if you guys don't have access to email, what you do is probably copy it in a flash drive or a floppy disk, and then that's how you transfer the code. So, but what Git and essentially GitHub, Git repository, online Git repository, what he has done is he has made it possible to work remotely with people. So while you're writing your code, your colleague who is on the other end of the world would also be writing their code, and you could easily push. We call it push. It is as an operation in Git where you send your code to the remote repository that's online, it lives online, say on GitHub, and then that your colleague can then wherever they are pull that same code and then run it on their own side or even improve it. So it makes it easy for number one to track changes. So if you're working on an idea on your own side and you want to try something else out, you can just do git branch, right? So no need to find a way to copy your code to a flash so you don't lose it. You just do git branch and then start working on the new idea while the old idea is already there. You can always switch back to that old idea that you were working on, or you can send it to your friend to start improving on it while you're trying out new things. So it just makes it a lot easier to keep track of changes that we make as developers, and also for us to collaborate. Git is so powerful. It's actually what makes it possible for most software engineers to collaborate remotely, making building amazing softwares all around the world. So that's what it is.
Yeah, that's great. So in essence, Git enhances collaboration between developers, allowing multiple developers to work on the same projects concurrently. So someone can be working on create user, another person can be working on login endpoints, another person can be working on fetching already created user. So these three different persons can be working on the same thing because they have access to the same repository, which is housing the application. So it's another form, it's another importance of Git. So another one is also code integrity. It's Git maintains integrity of our code base because each commit is identified as a unique hash, and then changes the code. Changes in the code can always be tracked. So another one is also I know of also backup and recovery. We can also recover our code through Git. It's also facilitates code review as well. So a developer can push his code. The mentor can be anywhere and then pull it and then review the code, send it back to him with comments of where to make changes, and then he pulls the code and then makes the amends and also push. So I think these are also another addition to it. So I don't know if there's any other question.
We don't have any question in the comment section now, so I think that's all of the questions.
Jackson, I have more. Oh, okay, Henry can.
We're running out of time, so we'll just take Henry's question and then try to round up.
Okay, Mr. Uchenna, thank you for. In fact, I'm more enlightened. There's one thing that beats my imagination, right? Uh, yeah, you're writing codes, and these codes we're writing. You're not writing these codes on a platform that belongs to you. Now you're writing a code on a platform that was developed by somebody. Uh, Now, will I say, the assurance of the security of these codes? Because over time, I hear some of these organizations, like some of the things you do on their platforms, they get their own, whether you secure it or not, they get their own back end results. So I don't know, is there anything that can be done, or that could be done, or if truly the security is very assured, and what can be done, what can one do to making sure that the code is much more secured, even to to those who own the platform I'm writing the codes on.
Okay. So by security, you mean getting your data right, accessing your data, or I want you to throw more
Yes,
light.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I understand what Henry is asking. So, Henry, correct me if I'm wrong. So, what you're trying to say is that essentially the codes we are writing, even in codes we are using to build all these secure applications, maybe bank server and all those things, we are using IDEs that were developed by another person who we may not trust so much. And so, what is the guarantee that these people that were using their platform to write these codes are not stealing our codes, just, probably picking at our codes and trying to look for loopholes? Is that what you're asking, Henry?
Exactly, perfect.
All
Okay.
right.
Um.
Eric, do you want me to respond to that, or
Before you go, first of all, okay, like the ID is like for Java we use IntelliJ, and then for we also have uh see what's the name we use for JavaScript again?
VS Code?
VS Code. We also have VS Code. I believe number one, these are reputable companies, and then they also follow SLE agreements, system level agreements for everything they are doing. So for IntelliJ, of course, VS Code is open source. Anybody can use it. But for IntelliJ, you have to obtain a license for it before you be able to use it. And then most of the coding you are doing, of course, when you write code, you have where you, of course, your data, you are storing it in your database already, which of course should be in a server somewhere. And then you personally, you should also have your own backup. Most organizations have their backup. So, and I believe this is why most organizations have, they are using their, they are not using cloud these days because of vulnerability. They are using their in-house servers for security. So for IDs, I don't usually think there's a way they can maybe have direct access to our data, because our data is usually in the database, which the IDE operators don't have direct access to. I don't know. Too, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
Yeah. So they don't have direct access to our data, because our data is usually stored in a, for instance, we can store it in Git. IDE operators, they don't have access to, Microsoft don't have access to GitHub. That's one. Then where we store our database, the servers will store them. IDE operators, they don't have access to that place. So what we do in their platform is usually the code writing itself. So too, you can add more ideas to it.
Okay, so just to add, Eric has pretty much explained all of it. So what we typically do when we're writing this code is, even if these platforms would have access to the codes, there are something we call secret variables that they typically don't have access to. So those secret variables are like what actually makes our applications to run. So we supply different secret keys, so while they can see why they may be able to see the code, which they don't, because if it's discovered that they actually look into the codes, their platform is going to crash, and their reputation as an organization, they have so much at stake. So it's going to be very unethical for them to actually start peeping into people's codes, right? Because most of these organizations, for instance, Microsoft that owns VS Code, they are very huge organizations, and they have a lot to lose if it's discovered that they actually do things like that. So they they typically don't. But in case they do, they will not, the risk of exposure is minimal, since most organizations don't typically expose their secret variables to all these coding editors. So you typically expose your secret variables to the hosting platform where your application actually lives. So they may see the logic, but they may not be able to have direct access to your data, just like Eric said, which is very important. So what they may be able to do, and I don't think they do, is to try to beat your system. So, but if you've done your security well enough, it shouldn't be a problem. I don't know if that explains it, but the world revolves around trust. It's just like, okay, how do we trust that the medicine that these people are giving us are not giving us something else instead of doing what it's supposed to do? So it's the same. That's similar kind of trust that we have for these systems, that most of them are actually public, so people can actually look at their code to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do and not doing something else, like VS Code. Henry, I hope that answers your question. Hope I've
Yeah,
not.
yeah, well understood.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Theo and Chinna, for doing justice to this topic. Well, 5 minutes, well, 4 minutes into the end of the webinar now. 4 minutes, yeah, almost to the end of the webinar. So I want to thank Uchenna again. Can we, with the use of our favorite emoji, can we just appreciate him? I'm going to be giving him a clap. Like, he's really done justice to the topic. And then we really, really appreciate your presence, Uchenna. I also thank you for his contribution. I believe that everybody has learned a thing or two, a thing or two here from this webinar. So at the beginning of the webinar, I've asked everyone to mention what city that they joined this webinar from without mentioning the name of the city. And we had some things in the comment section. I'd like to guess a few people's own, except one that I don't know. And without the person saying it, I would want every one of us to guess. So I live in the most populous city in Nigeria. I want to believe that that's Lagos. Someone is saying I live in the most, okay, that's most populous in West Africa. I live in the most rugged, in the city with the most rugged yellow buses. I don't know who can guess that. Actually the one that wrote that. I reside in the city where the seat of power is domiciled. I can guess that that's Abuja. Henry, you let us know if it's correct or not. Chinyere says she lives in the city that generates most of its wealth from taxes. Okay, I can guess that that's Lagos as well. Or if it's Lagos, is it really the city that generates most of its wealth from taxes? And then I reside in a city where who goes you means run or run. Okay, I can't guess this, but I want to say maybe it's Ibadan. So Bashirat and Henry, let us know if I'm correct. Okay, Henry says it's Abuja, correct. It's good to have you here, Henry. Bashirat, can let us know what city this is so that if we find ourselves there, we would quickly run when we hear who goes you. Yeah, is Bashirat still on the call?
She said it's Port Harcourt.
Yes, I'm on the call.
Okay,
It's Port
so let us
Harcourt.
know.
Port Harcourt.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone, if you find yourself in Port Harcourt and you hear who goes you, please run. No. Thank you very much for that answer, Bashirat. And then thank everybody for joining this webinar. It's good to have you, and we hope that you join us in the next one. So from me, that's all from me tonight. I wish every one of us a good night rest, and do enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you once again for joining us. See you next time. Bye.